I was so excited for this project, but one little mistake ruined the whole thing, which had me in tears because I had to do a correction on my own color correction. This is Haley, and she has so much hair. She's seen me once before because she wanted to have a chunky highlight look with some browns and some blondes, and now she wants to switch up her look. And so I told her to do a round of color oops at home so we can pull out some of the old color that's in her hair. I'm going to go really into detail over what's in her hair and why I was so freaked out to even do this service in the first place. But let's go over what she wants. This is the goal photo she brought in. She was very, very specific on what she wanted in this photo. She wanted the three very chunky highlights up top, and she only wanted three of them. The issue is, if you look at this girl, she has so many layers upon layers that she almost even has no hair at the very ends of her hair. And my client has tons and tons of hair that she wants to keep the length in. So no matter what we do for color placement, if we don't have the same cut, it just won't look the same. So I had to explain to my client, it took a long time to explain to her that the color placement can be the same, but if you don't have the same cut, we're not having the same end result. But she still didn't want to have that cut because of how long and thick her hair was. She wanted to keep that. So we compromised. I also had to explain the extreme risk that her hair is facing because of her previous hair history, but we'll go into that a little bit later. So let's get into it. Essentially, to do a color blocking service, you have to be very well pre planned. And for this client, I decided to section her into three sections. We have our top mohawk section, we have a section throughout the middle, and that's going to be kind of a hybrid. It's going to have some of the chunky pieces that we want reflected in the top, but it's also going to have some blended pieces that are in the underneath. And it's going to help blend the bottom section and the top section together so we don't have something so disjointed. Because this bottom section is something that I kind of made her compromise on a little bit. My client's biggest concerns were that the top would look exactly like the photo, but she had some flexibility on what would happen underneath. She still wanted chunky color blocking, but I said to her, we already have some of these pieces that have blonde ends and dark roots, and when you pull it forward, that was one of the things we liked so much about the last color placement that we did, was that when you pulled this underside forward, you could see very rooty blonde pieces. So let's work with what we have underneath and kind of recreate the same thing but with the new colors that we want, just by essentially using the dark color underneath in creative placement and keeping as much blonde as we can here. And then that way we can focus on the top and the front for our color blocking, but then everything underneath blends well and works well with it. So it's hard to explain, but overall we wanted that peekaboo effect without such a really hard root underneath, because her maintenance is going to be a lot easier just doing a half head each time. So let's go into the formula that I used today. She wanted a very dark espresso chocolate brown, so our base was 6-63 and 5-0 and 13 volume. The reason why I use this is because she really liked the look of the 663 because it had that chocolatey matte tone to it, but the 5-0 is going to help fill in any of the blonde areas and to help fill in the root so it doesn't look hollow, because we're putting this low light color on multiple colors in the hair. And as you're going to be watching throughout this video, you can see how I do my color placement. Not really going to be going into this underneath section so much detail wise. I'm essentially just trying to cover over everything that I think needs to be covered and keep anything light that I think needs to be kept light. Anything that's light enough to match the color that she's wanting, and everything else just goes dark because, again, we want a chunky look, and that's totally helpful for today. Another thing that we had talked about was merging her previous color in with her new color. And because when she sent me those photos, initially I thought, girl, you had dark to light, and then we took you from light to dark in some spots. So there's some previous highlights that got low lighted when you saw me in the summer. And then now you want to take some of those spots from dark to light again. So it's going dark light, dark light, dark light, and there's only so much that the hair will take before it just snafus right off. It's just fully gone. So her hair is so long, and that would be such a big loss for her to have that much hair snap off. And so I said, let's mitigate as much damage as possible by utilizing what we already have underneath that's light and not changing the placement under here. This will save us time, it will save you money, and it will save us a big headache of potential breakage with all this warm area under here. So I'm just refreshing the darkness in any area that it should be dark in, and doing the roots and any areas that aren't quite blonde enough. And the way that I can tell what was previously low lighted is it's more of a caramel blonde tone because she used Color Oops at home. And I told her she definitely needed to use that so it can expose those previous highlights that were toned over. The hairdresser she saw before me, I believe, used a permanent color, which is why there's such a deep, dark band of color in the middle. And we decided to continue on with just a demi-permanent like what I've been doing because she likes to change up her hair. And she has no grays, so there's not really a need for using such a hard permanent. But also that hard permanent color in the middle there is what kind of also determined our darker color today. Because if she wanted it lighter than what's currently there, we'd have to lighten her whole head. And we were like, that's not happening. We're not doing that. So we did the 663 and the 50 so it could fill in the hair in multiple areas. It had enough warmth and ash to neutralize and keep to a very dark espresso brown without going like overly black. Because this is a color correction, I did, yes, ask my client to use Color Oops on their own hair at home. I've done that before with some other clients, and essentially it saves them a ton of money and a ton of time because if they can use something that's totally safe on their own hair at home to remove some of this built up pigment before we lighten it, then they don't have to pay me $140 an hour to do the same thing that they can do at home easily and safely. Anything that requires lightening, I never recommend to clients at home, but anything that is just a totally safe color remover, I tell them do a few rounds of that at home to remove any color buildup, and that will make it easier and safer for us to lift your hair. It will cut a bunch of the time out for the color correction service, and it's less of a headache for both of us. I also used a little bit of clay lightener for any of these blonde pieces that I wanted to keep blonde but still looked a little bit caramelly. This is essentially like the slowest lift ever, and it's quite safe. These pieces felt totally fine. And because we had K18 in her hair too, I knew it was going to be pretty safe and that these foils were going to be sitting in for literally hours. But with the clay lightener, it just dries up eventually. It lifted like maybe one level over the hours. And most of this back here was done in a way to reflect and connect the underneath to the top section. These sides here, these little pieces that I'm pinning away, are going to be blonde, and everything that I'm throwing to the front is going to be blonde. Everything that I've kind of pulled right here is going to be dark. So we're doing really big chunky slices, and I'm pulling out some of these pieces because they're already blonde in the ends, and I actually kind of wanted to keep that behind the ear because again, it gives a nice blend between those super chunky stripes and the more ombre blendy pieces that go down. Again, we're having like a fusion hybrid in this hair, and it makes it uniquely hers, and we really like the aesthetic of having both of those fused and mixed together, which is another reason why this took honestly so long to put in, is because we were trying to mitigate any potential damage as well as give her a very chunky look and keep in mind the look she already has in her hair. It does take a very long time. Overall, this service took, oh my gosh, she was in the chair for over 13 hours, but just foiling her hair took 4.5 hours. And I think putting in just the lowlights here took 3.5 hours. It took forever. I also had to be thinking about timing for something like this because she has so much hair. It's super tangly. It's very long, and putting in lowlights is very finicky because if you miss a piece, then it will be totally obvious. It will be shown. Lowlights are not like bleach in the same way on how they deposit and how they look. So you need to be very meticulous with making sure you have full saturation for your lowlights, because people will notice if you don't saturate properly, especially on those blonde pieces. They're going to show it. They're going to show all your mistakes. So with these lowlights here, I decided to do all of the lowlights on her head first and then go back and do any highlights, which is also another reason why it helps that we didn't put any highlights in the underneath bottom section of her hair, because having to move all this stuff around and pin it in different places, and it's 11 pounds of color on her head, it just wasn't necessary to do that. So doing all the lowlights first allows us to just leave those foils sitting there, and that way she doesn't have to worry about any damage happening. Then we can put in the highlights, and when they're done, everything gets rinsed out all at once. So this is technically where it all goes wrong, and where a lot of my issues started too with application. So I'm going to kind of go into that, but pretty much everything underneath worked out really well, and I'm really happy with that. Placement wise, application wise, underneath all went fantastically. This was the placement we were going for, where that front money piece was going to be blonde and everything in the clips was going to be dark brown. Blonde, brown, blonde, and then brown here, and then blonde in this chunk, and then that back section will be brown. We had gone over it for a while and done a lot of consultation over it. I held the pieces up for her, showed her everything, and everything seemed right. It really totally did not end up looking right, and there's a reason for that, and I'll explain it in a little bit. Let's go into why I wouldn't do application this way. I started again, yes, just with all the dark pieces and pushed past all of the light because that will go in later. What I did wrong here was I bit off more than I could chew. I tried using these big foils and folding it over the head and pulling it up tight up close to where the root is, because I'm essentially doing on the scalp with this color. And with these really big foils, I just could not get close enough to the scalp to do on the scalp color with them. I also ended up taking just sections that were too big, so I had to spend literally minutes at a time blending this all in and saturating it, when if I honestly just took thinner, smaller sections, it would have been done in a quarter of the time, and it wouldn't have been so heavy. Because it was heavy, it was like pulling down on the foil and exposing that root and causing that root to touch down on the area that I didn't want to be colored just behind it. So that ends up being a huge mess, which is why cotton is my bestie. But you're going to see how sloppy and big and heavy these foils are. It's such a mess, and again, would not recommend doing it this way, because you'll see it better with this one right here. I'm struggling to even place the foil, trying to get it right up on the scalp there. It keeps shifting, it keeps moving. I've got way too wide of a section and just way too much hair in there. And with me constantly using the brush on the hair, it's pulling down the foil, and I can't scoot it back up properly. Laying down another piece and going thin section at a time isn't really working, because it's creating so much space between the foil and the scalp. And this took so long, and it just added more time onto my service, and it's not a good idea. It sounds like it'll be better in your head and in theory, but in practice, just do thin, teeny tiny slices, and you'll be able to do them really fast and go, rapid fire one after another, rather than spending 5 minutes cleaning up a foil that took 15 minutes to put it in the first place. Because again, precision is key with this type of service. You want to be very clean everywhere you go, because if you touch that dark color anywhere that you don't want it to be, it will be obvious. So let's talk about when I started doing it right, because I was getting so tired of doing that. Here is what I did to switch it up to the right method. I went to smaller foils, where I could very easily put that foil right up against the scalp, right up against the root, and then that way I could apply the color fully saturating the hair, because the hair is so thin, it's easy to penetrate through it and get to the other side of the foil, fully coat the hair without missing any spots. I could get on the scalp and not worry about the hair pulling the foil down, causing it to be heavy, scooting out of the way, and I don't have to worry about later when I'm gonna have to flip those foils forward and back, because they're in there so tightly. This is a close-up of how I work with those smaller foils and scoot that product right up onto the scalp there to create a saturated line, because again, we want lines with this one, but very clean, crisp, clear lines. And that's how you apply a proper color blocking slice. Then I like to fold over with a little extra clearance to cover over that root area. and then continue on with the next one. This is my last slice, and I don't put quite as much color right up on the scalp there because I don't want it to bleed forward towards that bleached area, but there's still just enough touch down that I know it's going to be on the scalp and give her that solid look that I want. It might seem tedious, but it's perfectionist and it is precision work, so it's actually faster to do it the tedious way. Now that all the brown is in, it can just sit there and wait until the blonde has finished processing, which is something that I'd always recommend to do when you're doing a big color over job like this, because every hair on the head is being colored, because anything that we see right now that is technically brown, it's actually very red, and we want to cover that. And anything that is blonde is staying blonde or being blonded up higher. Anything that's dark and ruddy and brown is being lightened. So it's just judgment calls all over the head, and it takes forever to apply. And I just am so much more comfortable with having the color sit there for hours, because once it's done its timer, it just stops processing. It just sits there. And then the blonde can go in, sit for as long as it needs to, whether that's 20 minutes or 4 hours. It has the time it needs to process fully without being interrupted by washouts. And then I can just wash out everything all at once. I'm using 2 formulas here, one for the dark areas and one for the previously bleached areas. The dark areas has 20 volume and the previously bleached areas has 7 volume. And the way that I'm applying these foils is I'm not doing a fold up and lock. I am just laying it down onto the foil and putting another foil on top of it. And this will prevent the foil from slipping and dragging downwards. It keeps it up as close to the scalp as possible because, again, I'm wanting the bleach to be on the scalp enough that it will lighten up on the scalp, but not enough that it pushes out and has so much swelling that it swells into the dark areas and causes them to have patches and spots and splotches. And I just worked my way from the back of the head towards the front on the sides and the top at the same time. 4.5 hours of foiling later, and what I'm doing here is I'm pulling a lot of my foils to sit forward so they can incubate and keep it warm on everything that's in the front that was just last put in, and then the back can have a little bit of cool down. And you can see that those foils are already pretty well getting close to being done. So luckily she won't need long before we do her rinse out. I didn't film the rinse out because honestly it was an hour of her just at the sink and me detangling her and washing her, and it's just not necessary. So this is what it looks like after the rinse out. She is so blonde and so dark, and this looks super cool. Honestly, it's super edgy, super alternative, but it did freak her out a little bit because the blonde is obviously lighter than its goal picture because we're about to tone it down. Some of those ends are still a little bit yellowy, but have no fear, we are about to tone her hair. We're going to start with a filler tone that's going to add some warmth back into her hair and balance out her roots to ends, which is 846, 80, and Biscuit in Schwarzkopf. And then we did one to cool it down and balance it, and that's the formula below. And let's talk about this finished result here because we are not done. We're only halfway through the video because, guys, I messed up so bad. So let's talk about it. Pretty much, we were taking the after photos, and she seemed happy, but not over the moon happy with it. And I couldn't put my finger on it. I said, what was wrong here? We did everything like what she asked. We tried to make it look like the photo, but has it just been too long and I have hairdresser blindness and I need to go home and just sleep it off? Well, she sent me a text and I saw it when I got home and I immediately burst into tears because I was just so defeated because it didn't look like the photo. Here's the photo again, just as a reference for you guys. We talked about this over the phone for like probably an hour to try to figure out what it is that we could do because we just turned everything light and everything dark, and some of that stuff had to be put into reverse again. And that is so high risk. I have to color correct my own color correction. And I said, can you come in for 8:30 a.m. tomorrow? And I bought her a Starbucks and I just got her to come in. And I'm so grateful that she did because we decided that there was too much of the dark, or it was like too big of a chunk, and we needed to break it up with some more light. But the thing is, it just went dark. But the other thing is, it has to be done while it's fresh. This color cannot sit and live in the hair. The longer it does, the more it's just gonna is gonna be in there more permanently. So I said to her, come in first thing in the morning before any of your clients, because she's a lash artist, before any of my clients, and we will fix this. It's super, super high risk, but I'm not happy with the result either. It looked pretty good last night, but there was just something off and I couldn't place it. When she showed me the photos, I said, no, we do need more blonde. So let's add in some more blonde chunks here. They're going to be skinnier than the blonde chunks we already have. And she was okay with it because even though it's not exactly like the photo and the 3 blonde chunks that she wanted initially, this ended up being so much better. So I'm going to show you guys what I did and walk you through it. Luckily, she had a box of Color Oops because I didn't have any. So she brought it with her, and this was the most important step possible for making sure that her hair wouldn't completely melt out of her head, because we are taking it from like a level 4-5 back to like a level 9. This is so high risk, and it's right up on the top, and it's on her parting. If this goes wrong, her hair is going to melt all the way off. So we're using Color Oops to remove that brand new fresh color. Again, the fresher, the better, the easier this is. So I wanted to get this in ASAP, not wait over the weekend. We have to do this now. So we used Color Oops on these 2 skinny chunks of blonde here, and then ever so slightly shrunk down the size of that middle blonde piece there. She also wanted a heavier root shadow, which we ended up also doing. We were so short on time, even though this took 4 hours on the second day. So overall, yes, our time in the chair was like 13 hours. But when you pay $1,000 for your color correction, and that's after the discount, by the way, when you pay $1,000 for your color correction, you want it to look good. And I know I've said it before, color correction is not color perfection, but this was something I could fix and needed to fix, and I just didn't feel right about leaving it like this. Yes, it was technically what she had asked for, but it just didn't look right. It didn't give the appeal of what we wanted. And I love doing these alternative colors and color block placements, and I just really wanted to see a really beautiful result as well. And I'm so glad that she did let me come in, and I thanked her profusely for it, because again, it's just so much of her time that she's giving up as well as her money. When I'm using Color Oops or any kind of color remover, I am super, super cautious. That's one of the reasons why this appointment did take so long, is all the extra steps you need to do to be really careful that you don't have spillage or spots or anything. Because again, with it being a really high contrast color and very intentional block placements, you're gonna see if a little bit of the bleach goes on where the dark bit is, or if a little bit of the dark color goes on to where the bleached areas are. So utilizing cotton and double foiling is just really the way to go, in my opinion, just to make sure that you're not making a mess. And if you do have a little bit of a mess, it's easy to touch up and fix. It's no big deal. Also, I like to keep the area warm because my salon sometimes has AC, so I'm not applying direct heat to it, but I am keeping the head warm and bagging it up so it's insulated. As you guys can see, probably a little bit here, the Color Oops has like pulled a little bit of the toner out from the blonde area, and that's totally okay because we're going to be retoning and re-root shadowing down anyways. The root shadow that I applied yesterday didn't even really show up too much because I was a little nervous that it was going to go too dark, and it's hard to make dark things light again, as we are experiencing right now. So, but she was like, no, let's go even darker with it. I'm like, okay, I'm comfortable with that. That's fine. I'm totally fine with people asking to take something even darker because it's an easy fix. It's a toner. It's not doing literally this where I have to clarify and Color Oops and bleach everything all over again and hope that nothing melts off. So I'm doing the Color Oops a second time around after I've towel dried, and that will just help to lift out any extra color in those mids and ends because the roots have lifted really nicely and revealed that underlying pigment, but everything else needed a second go. After that, I applied the K18 mist and also the mask directly on top because I am paranoid about this hair melting off. I did extremely fine sections and used Schwarzkopf Blonde Me, Blonderplex, and 20 volume, and did like really skinny slices all in a row to re-lighten these areas up to be our new blonde chunks. And then I just incubated that hair, no heat was applied or anything, and just watched it like a hawk. and it lifted up so fast because there was no color molecules left in the hair to get in the way. It was just raw lift, and then the orange that was in the hair naturally. Then I used Schwarzkopf Vibrance 663, 50, and 60 with a 6 volume. It's a smidgen lighter than the color we used last night because last night we did use a clarifying shampoo on the hair, and that kind of brightened up the dark brown a slight bit. So I just didn't want to have the risk of putting in a couple of slices of this dark brown and not have it match. So a little bit of the formula was a level 60. And I'm just using this to retouch up any of the dark bits that need it and any of the roots that need it, anywhere where the color remover may have gone. And then we did decide to copy what was done in the inspo photo. Even though initially it was not wanted, we looked at it and went, it's such a tiny slice, but it makes such a big difference to have that little piece of dark in the front. I think we should go for it. It's gonna be so cute. It's a little bit edgy and it adds some interest into the look. So she was totally for it, and we decided that this was the better way to go. And I'm so glad we did it because the results are incredible. Here she is after the blow dry. I'm combing everything through, and this is just giving you guys a good look of what things look like overall when they're straight. And I also had a couple minutes to throw in some curls, and she was running a little bit late for her day, so I didn't have a lot of time to take the photos I really wanted, but I just took a couple of videos and I thought I can pull photos from these and from this blow dry video. Look at how shiny and healthy her hair is. We only had like maybe an inch or two of the ends kind of snap off, and that's totally realistic for what ended up happening to the hair. I think that that's actually kind of amazing and a miracle that we didn't have more snap off, but the top and the middle are totally like healthy and shiny and beautiful. Very, very grateful that the hair held on and that K18 helped to keep the hair in good integrity while we did this huge color correction service. But yeah, so she had me do a couple of little quick loose waves so we could really see that color pop through. And I can't wait to show you guys those after videos. This is just how I really quickly throw in curls for my clients if they only have 3 to 5 minutes to style their hair. I just wrap it around real fast, big chunks, and it just gives some like soft body to the hair. Nothing crazy, nothing over the top curly. I wouldn't even call this curly. It just, yeah. Anyways, as you guys can probably see, all of that beautiful dimension swirling in between the hair. This is one of my favorite things about calico hair and alternative hair coloring techniques. If you're considering getting something like this done and you live in the Greater Vancouver area, please consider giving me a call because I love doing services like this. It's really, really fun and challenging, and it's just a very fun, creative color placement. So that is what I have been crashing out over for the past couple of days because yes, the initial service was exhausting and it didn't end up turning out well, but luckily my client was super gracious and gave me the opportunity to fix it, and I appreciate her so much for that because like this end result is just so beautiful, and I think it's exactly what we both wanted. And I'm so glad that she was able to communicate to me the things that she wanted in her hair and what she wasn't super happy with. And I'm just so pleased with this result. What do you guys think of this? Did you guys like it? Leave a comment below telling me what you thought, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.